Welcome to Beyond Rent, the property management podcast brought to you by Rent Manager. Each episode, we sit down with an expert to talk industry updates, tech solutions, and top tips for those in the property management space. And now, let's get to the conversation and go Beyond Rent.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Beyond Rent. Property managers work with a wide range of residents. They come from different backgrounds and demographics. So property managers have to have a unique skill set to relate to and help all types of different people. So we have Abe from Housing Unlimited joining us today to share his insights on this topic. Abe, welcome to Beyond Rent.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's a real privilege to be with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation. We talk about all types of different things on the podcast, technology, operations, things like this. Things like that. But one of the things I get really excited about is when we talk about how we help people and help people with housing. It's so important. It's foundational. People need a place to live. So when we get to talk about how we help people with that, I get extra excited about the topic. So looking forward to learning more from you. Before we jump all the way into the conversation, though, I'd love to learn more about you. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you're all about.
Sure. My name is Abe Schuchman. I'm the CEO of Housing Unlimited, a nonprofit affordable housing corporation in Montgomery County, Maryland. We strive to promote community integration and independence for very low-income adults in mental health recovery. And we do it by purchasing homes throughout the county. We just closed on our 95th home, and it's shared housing. So the 95 homes, scattered site homes, serve 260 people. We've been at it for 32 years. This is our 32nd year, and we're striving to expand and purchase more homes because we have over 200 people on our waiting list, and that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's a great indicator of the level of need that's out there for housing, specifically for people in this situation. And 32 years, that's a long time to be doing something. Beyond Rent, that is actually ran by Rent Managers, property management software, but we've been around for a similar amount of time, right? Our software was written way back in the 80s. So I think we have a long history. You've got a long history. So you've seen a lot of changes in the industry, and it sounds like you have a lot of passion for helping people out, which is really exciting. So help me understand that history of 32 years. Why start Housing Unlimited? What was kind of the inspiration or the passion behind it?
Well, Housing Unlimited started as an affordable housing committee of Montgomery County chapter of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And NAMI and the committee really saw a crisis in terms of affordable housing for folks in mental health recovery. And that really was the impetus. A disproportionate number of people that we serve are coming to us from homelessness, from very low income situations. And there's just an acute shortage of quality housing for folks with limited incomes in general, but certainly for the folks we serve in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we hear about the housing shortage and specifically around attainable or affordable housing. It's a real issue out there. And I can only imagine if you're facing some other life challenges that it just gets worse for these people, right? They really are in a situation where they need a lot of help. So that was the inspiration way back when. It sounds like it started out as just a committee trying to help and foster this in that area. But you've been doing it for a long time now and slowly growing and helping more and more people. Now you're over hundreds of people that you help on a regular basis. When somebody needs help, you mentioned there's 200 people on your waiting list. How do people get approved or approach you or qualify for this type of housing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what we do have a vetting process, and over the years we've fine-tuned that process. We do an in-depth interview. My staff has a lot of experience probing whether or not a person's a good fit for our shared independent housing. So we'll do an hour interview and really explore this with the applicant. And a person does have to have at least $400 of monthly income. We have a rent payment system on a sliding scale, but we do need people to pay on that sliding scale, rent so that we can help, keep the lights open and all that good stuff. Because we are serving people in mental health recovery, that is an important criterion for us. Having said that, a person who has a housemate preference, if that person is not a consumer, not a person with lived experience, that's okay. And they can list that person as a housemate preference. But the big question for us is a person a good fit for shared independent living?
Yeah, and that seems like it would be a difficult question to answer. An hour is a long time to talk to somebody, but in that shared environment, I'm sure that introduces all types of unique situations you have to work around and ask certain questions and so forth. So I'm sure that's a challenging part, right? Making sure the right people get on the list and get listed as qualified so they can potentially move forward at some point. With another question that comes to mind with thinking about that waiting list, how long do people typically stay in this type of housing? Because I'd imagine, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that your goal is to help move them back into, independent living where they're not in a shared housing anymore.
It is true that there would be no greater compliment than if a person moved out after a time to market rate housing. That is the ultimate. Having said that, mental health challenges can be cyclical. And so a person can be doing really well for a month or a year or 5 years and then hit a rough patch. And so with that in mind, we from the get-go said that if a person honors their lease, we are prepared to renew it. So we have had tenants stay a year, 3 years, 20 years. And the big question for us is, are you honoring the lease?
And I think that's a question everyone asks, right? So it's very interesting to see the similarities sometimes of how you operate versus market rent, because a lot of times that's, like I said, a lot of operators are out there asking that exact same question. Are they honoring the lease? If so, we should carry on and continue to move forward, even though the ultimate goal would be market rent independent living. That's not necessarily the core thing that you're looking at and thinking about. So I have another question as far as the structure of your company. You said you have 95 homes serving hundreds of people, the shared housing scattered site model. When you're looking at homes to acquire, are there certain criteria there, certain types of homes that meet the needs of your business better than others?
Yeah, our board of directors early on set up a set of key criteria for the site selection process. On this theme of we were talking about earlier about promoting independence, we're looking for quality homes near good public transportation, shopping, employment, and support services. So that's very, very important to us. Of course, we're looking for a reasonable price, but I'd say the dominant question for us is this a really, really quality home that a person can hop on a bus, because 99% of our folks don't have vehicles, can hop on a bus and get to where they want to go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I had not considered that initially, but again, when we're referring to people that are looking for affordable housing, that lower income level, transportation is always a concern, right? So you want to put them in places where they can walk to different services or shopping, or like you said, hop on some good, reliable public transportation to get them to the places they need. Well, that's great. I really appreciate you kind of walking me through that, because I think the way that you view your business is different and unique compared to how a market rent operation would look at acquiring properties, whether they're single family or multifamily. It's just a different type of model. So I think that's really helpful. But I think the real goal for today is to get deep into understanding the different ways that we can work with this type of demographic, right? If they're having some issues in their life and they need this type of housing, there may be things that you're doing that maybe all property managers could or should be doing, but you're kind of an expert in this and helping manage the communication pieces. So let's jump into that. What does it look like on the communication side to make sure that you're maintaining a good relationship with these types of residents?
Definitely. And by the way, your point about hopefully some of the things we're doing can be applied to other folks. Our metrics, what we're seeking is for in terms of outcomes, is when we evaluate, the year, did 90% of our tenants pay their rent on time, respect others, and keep a clean unit? And did 90% of our tenants sustain their independence in housing for 1 year or more? So that's the kind of big picture that's driving this. And on the front end, we have found that in terms of tenants succeeding in all the above, we have to really, from the get-go, strive to build a respectful, meaningful relationship with the tenant. So we'll do an hour or 2 hour lease signing where we really take the time to answer questions, explain the rationale for lease provisions, um, and be laser focused on the traditional measures of being a good tenant, the payment of rent on time, respecting housemates, keeping a clean unit. And that we have found is a good investment of an hour or two. The other thing I'll really underscore is we really don't want people to just sign on the bottom line. We really want people to have ownership and understanding of the provisions of the lease. We have a quiet hours provision. Why do we have a quiet hours provision? Going into, well, your housemate may be heading out to work early in the morning, your neighbors, the sensitivity to your neighbors, et cetera. So really, really trying to go beyond, like I said, signing on the bottom line.
Yeah. And again, I keep thinking of how this relates to people in market rent or other type of rental situations. I can guarantee they're not spending 2 hours going through the lease, right? But to your point, there's so much value in going through that, explaining these rules. Again, the shared housing element really adds a new element to this, but probably not that much different than like student housing. When you think about student housing and how that often works with shared living situations. And again, pointing back to the fact that you are working with people that are working through these mental health issues, I'm sure that gives them a sense of understanding, a sense of peace, not only for the expectations of themselves, but they also know that their housemate has these same expectations, right? And I'd imagine there's a little bit of comfort in that the person they'll be living with also has agreed to these same terms.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point. And there is, when there is that comfort, as you're saying, when there is that ownership over the contents of the lease, I think it does go a long, long ways towards getting buy-in from the tenant, at the get-go, that this is a two-way street. We're going to be responsive to your maintenance requests and so forth, but we're going to keep a bar high in terms of the classic obligations of any tenant. The other thing that we try to do to build on that initial investment, if you will, at the lease signing is to stay in communication with our tenants, to try to be really responsive to those maintenance requests, housemates' concerns, to try to not have a purely transactional relationship with our tenants, to take a moment to say, hey, how's your day going? What's going on at your place of employment? How's that going for you? To build a human relationship, not just a transactional landlord-tenant relationship, can go a long ways towards building a very positive landlord-tenant, outcome.
So that's interesting. And I would agree, creating that human connection is always important. When and how are you conducting that type of communication? Is it written? Is it in person? How are you conducting that?
We're doing all the above. I know this is not realistic for the average landlord, but to keep the bar high in terms of catching small maintenance problems before they become large maintenance problems, in our lease that a person signs, it says that we're going to visit a home weekly to inspect for cleanliness, catch small maintenance problems before they become large ones. And during those weekly visits, if a person happens to be home, uh, our staff is going to take the time to really schmooze with the person, to not just jump into the inspection, but to say, like I said, how's your day going? How are you? To build that human connection, because if things do become challenging, hopefully there's that reservoir of goodwill and human connection that we can tap into to help things out. We also, in addition to that, we're on the phone with folks, try to really keep an open phone, open door policy. Definitely communicating by email, text. In our experience, the more a person feels comfortable reaching out to us about landlord-tenant matters, the higher the probability that things go well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that's great. Weekly visits. That's quite an undertaking for a property management company to conduct, right?
Sure.
95 homes, so 95 visits a week. That is a lot going on. And I'd imagine, as you said, you're catching maintenance issues early. You're helping to make sure that they're maintaining that lease. You're supporting all the things that you communicated during that lease signing and making sure that you can get things addressed early instead of waiting until it becomes a problem. But if you're really taking time to invest in that human relationship, those are not quick visits sometimes, right? Those can be longer visits as people probably want to share a little bit and talk a little bit and socialize, but I'm sure it pays dividends in that long-term relationship.
I think that's right. I mean, I think just like we were talking earlier about the 1 to 2 hour lease signing and taking that time, I think I'd like to believe that in some situations by doing that, we're saving hundreds of hours in terms of litigation, difficult tenant situations, and so forth. So hopefully it's a good investment of time. I definitely get, as you're saying, that it's not realistic, the weekly visit for a lot of landlords, but maybe quarterly, triannually, maybe worth exploring.
Yeah, and you go back historically it was very common, especially in the multifamily world, maybe less in scattered site single family, but it was very common for people to pay their rent in person, right? Because they're writing a check or a money order. And there's that monthly touch base. While it wasn't in the home, in the unit, there's still that touch base where there's a little bit of building a rapport and getting to know the person and building that. That's really removed from most of our relationships right now that people pay online or however that's conducted. So it is kind of a good reminder of saying, well, how are we connecting with our residents on a regular basis so they have a face with a name? I know in market rent, retention is really important. Lease renewals are important. Well, if they don't have a connection with you, there's a good chance they may not renew. And in your situation, it's probably a little bit of the same, but a lot of it is actually making sure that these people feel supported, respected, and that you're keeping the right people in these homes. Because like you said, you've got hundreds of people that are looking for this type of housing.
That's right. That's a great point about kind of the 21st century way we pay our rent and so forth. That certainly very efficient, but something can get lost that way.
It definitely gets lost. What are some of the ways that you're evolving this communication? Because I people talk all the time about how important communication is, but it continues to be the number one thing that we all struggle with, right? Communication just could always be better. It could be more clear, more transparent. Specifically with this type of resident that is facing some mental health concerns or issues, are there certain different ways that you're communicating with them to make sure that they understand and they feel supported?
Well, I think number one, we insist on, in certain situations, in-person communication. Per your point, we think there's in some situations no substitute to that. So we are doing in-person lease signings, and then tenants are not required to be present for those weekly common area inspections, but we do bi-monthly, every other month, bedroom inspections for, again, cleanliness, maintenance issues. And for those, we are requiring a person to be physically present. So that's number one. And then I'd say number two, we're trying to do a better job of listening to our tenants on how they want to communicate. So some prefer phone, some prefer email, some prefer text, and just having the flexibility and the attentiveness to what's the choice of the tenant.
Yeah, and we hear that across the board from every type of operator, that really the movement forward is letting the consumer, the resident, choose how to be communicated to. I mean, and we see it in our personal lives, right? Whenever you
Sure.
fill out, whether it's at the doctor's office or whatever service provider you're using for different situations, they're often asking what's the best way to contact you, phone, email, text, whatever it may be, because their goal is to get you to respond, get you to read the message. So they want to send it in the way that's most likely for you to interact with it. So that's great that you're taking those steps along the way.
That's great. That's very true. My sons have made it clear that texting is the form of communication they prefer. So I definitely hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it's I know for a long time email was the most popular form. Anymore, most people's email inboxes are full and they can't get through it all. So they say, I don't know the stat off the top of my head, but text messaging is read almost instantly when it comes in by, I want to say 80+%, 90+% of people that receive it. So it is a very, very quick method where people are really looking for it, right? They're ready for it. They respond very quickly to it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, communication is really important. Now, one of the things I want to uncover with you, because of your unique business structure and the type of clientele that you have, is this idea of understanding what type of mental health support services that are out there, how you engage with them, and maybe how you would encourage others to engage with them. So you've been doing this a long time, so I'm sure this has evolved over the past 32 years, but help me understand what that looks like working with this demographic of resident.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say we say that we work on parallel paths, the landlord-tenant path and what we call the parallel, if you will, compassionate layperson path, because we're not experts, we're not social workers. I'm an attorney by training. We don't have social workers on our staff. We have really a traditional property management focus. So on the landlord-tenant path, when we have a difficult tenant situation, on that path, what we're really striving for is good communication, clear communication. So if there's least violative behaviors, say a person's playing their music too loud in violation of the quiet hours provisions of our lease, we want to speak to the person, number one, and explain our position, explain the lease violation, go over the rationale for that provision of the lease, and then we're going to reinforce it in writing. And we're going to put it in writing. We're going to list the lease provision, and then we're going to list the facts, the behaviors that were in violation of that provision. I do want to emphasize that we're staying laser focused on the lease. It's a traditional lease, so we're not talking about did the person miss a doctor's appointment or something like that. We are focused on the key contractual, if you will, behaviors. And then I would say that we do have a tiered warning system. So we'll explain, this is warning number one. Please turn the ship around and change your behavior and comply with the lease. And the consequences of not doing it, final warning. Final warning comes out, same process. If it happens again, the next step is termination of tenancy. Just trying to be clear, detailed, transparent, and not using I language like Abe feels that you really shouldn't turn the music on so loud, but rather the lease says, that kind of objective lease language kind of way of talking, so that there's no ego, there's no sort of personal dynamic to this. The parallel track that we do as compassionate lay people, particularly if someone's in a mental health rough patch, is we've cultivated an understanding of who the key support service providers are in Montgomery County, Maryland. And we'll reach out to them and say, Our expertise is housing, but we think that there may be a mental health piece to this, something like that. Would you mind reaching out to the person and offering your services? So we have that layer. And then if there's a crisis, many jurisdictions, including Montgomery County, Maryland, have what you would call mobile crisis teams. This is considered if you will, more effective, more compassionate alternative to calling 911. So we're talking about a mobile crisis team that's this holistic, if you will, team that may include a social worker, may include a peer, a person with lived experience who can really connect. And then there might be police support, but the people in the lead are the members of this mobile crisis team. And that can be a great partner to have if you find yourself in a crisis situation.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, Abe. Starting with kind of where you started on, I love the parallel paths, right? That when there is a concern, something's come up with one of the residents, if it's a lease violation, you treat it like a lease violation, right? You have this warning system in place, but the lease says that you were going to do this, you need to do this, or there's consequences there. And it's very interesting because on the outside looking in, I didn't know what to expect as far as like what your answer was going to be and how you handled this. And the fact that you really just treat it like a traditional property manager would. And I think that's so great because as these people are managing their mental health, I think it's very important that they be treated like anyone else would be treated. And I think many of them would actually ask for that, right? Like I'm trying to do the things I need to do. I want to get better at these things. So I want to be treated in such a way. And so I think that's really amazing that you stick to that. And that's a good reminder to anyone that that's the right way to approach a lease violation, right? The lease says this, you did that. That's a problem. Now, when you get through that warning system and you talked about terminating the tenancy there in the lease, is it a traditional eviction process at that point?
Yes, it is a traditional eviction process. I'd add one caveat though. And 9 times out of 10, if the tenant communicates with us and is remorseful and wants to stay and identifies sort of a game plan on how the least violative behavior will not happen again, at our discretion on a case-by-case basis, we'll enter into a settlement agreement and effectively suspend the eviction. And we'll really document the terms and conditions of the settlement agreement. As you can imagine, I'll just give you an example. As you can imagine, in a shared living situation, we have what we call a limited guest policy. You can't just move someone in as your guest. You can have a guest for a limited period of time each month. If someone violates the guest policy, and we go through the warning system, as you mentioned, we get to an eviction level, and we have the conditions for settlement. In this situation, we 9 times out of 10 are going to place into that settlement agreement a no guest addendum. That's going to be the consequence for that breach of trust around violating the guest policy. So we tried to find ways to give someone a final chance, but it's going to be on our terms where we feel we have the best chance of that person succeeding and out of respect for the housemates.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That there's opportunity for remorse and second chances, which is always important, but an action plan, right? And that's I would say common sense for a lot of people. But when we think about helping people through different difficult challenges and different situations, they need maybe some more structure, some more guardrails to help keep them in place. And then you spoke about that other parallel side, the compassionate side of it, and working with the local services. So I want to dig into that a little bit because I think that's really important. And even for anyone that is a property manager, they've worked with somebody that has some mental health issues that are working through things, right? This is very common in our society. A lot of people are struggling in these areas, but I don't think most people are approaching it the way that you approach it. And I don't think they're prepared for when something comes up, right? Where you said, well, this person just needs to be connected with a service versus somebody really needs some help now, right? This is actually like an emergency. This is a crisis. What advice do you have for property managers that don't have something in place, that would like to put something in place, but they're maybe a little concerned about overstepping, maybe even, stepping out of bounds as far as legalities and privacy and things like that? Where are the boundaries there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very important question. I think there's a huge difference between coercion versus offering of assistance. So, in that notion of building lines of communication with local support service providers and so forth, we have found the notion of reaching out and saying we're concerned about someone, and framing it in lease terms, like person for 5 straight years never missed a rent payment, and we're concerned they're having going through a rough patch. They strangely have stopped paying their rent. Could you offer assistance? Can go a long ways towards, in a respectful way, in a non-coercive way, giving people options. So I think that's an important way to frame the overall approach.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me because, again, going back to people don't know where that line is and how forceful to be with it. And I really think that's the compassionate side, is saying there is the service out there. This is an offering, right? This is something maybe to consider is a great approach. How would a property manager go about in finding these resources and connecting with these places?
I'd say a couple things. One is that I think in almost every jurisdiction on the mental health side of things, there's a NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, NAMI chapter in your neck of the woods, and that can be a great starting point on that front. The other thing I'd mention is I think in almost every jurisdiction, there's an umbrella group that is like the trade association for nonprofits. And oftentimes there are nonprofit support service providers that are members of those nonprofit umbrella groups. So, reaching out to the executive director of that umbrella group, program officer, whoever, could be a great way to begin to learn the lay of the land in terms of the support services in your jurisdiction. And then finally, on that crisis side, I think many jurisdictions do have a crisis number to call for any crisis. And that may be a good start to understand what kind of resources are available for someone who really need help.
Yeah, thanks for providing that advice, because people, if they do want to build this out and make it a formalized program, I think that's probably the key, is for any company that's out there that wants to do this, and you should do this, right? You should have these resources for your residents. You really should formalize the program, right? You should think about it ahead of time and find out who those people are, start connecting, figuring out their process, how to get people into these programs, offering, and so forth. So when it does happen, not if it'll happen, when it happens, that you have kind of a plan in place. Is that typically what you see?
Yeah, definitely. I will add that some jurisdictions around the country may not have, say, these mobile crisis teams we were talking about earlier, but what they might have are specially trained police officers. In Montgomery County, Maryland, the police, there's a subset of the police who go through a special training, sensitivity training, expertise training on how to de-escalate situations in which a person might be in mental health crisis. So at a minimum, I'd like to believe that every jurisdiction has police officers that one may want to specifically request, you might say, to kind of flag, hey, this is the overall situation. Can I specifically request that folks with this training come out?
Yeah, no, that's true. I was not aware of that. So that's another value add there, right? Another resource that might be available if you don't have that mobile crisis unit that can step in. Well, Abe, that's great. I really, really love hearing stories like this because people need housing. It doesn't matter what stage of life or what you may be dealing with, whether it's short-term or long-term, everyone needs housing, and they need a place to feel safe and supported, and also learn kind of how these systems work and how renting a home works so they can continue to work within that system. As we kind of turn the corner towards the end of our episode here, Abe, what are some of the other bits or pieces of advice that you would give? Like I said, you've been doing this for a long time. If we have a property manager that's actively working with a resident that is having some mental health struggles, any tips that you want to give as we kind of wrap up today?
I definitely feel and understand the challenges that property managers can definitely experience in these kinds of situations. I'd say one thing that I was probably stating the obvious that we haven't stated is that always keep level-headed, always keep calm, even in the face of an escalating situation, or the tenant, escalating the situation. You stay here. Keep your calm, keep your professionalism. That can go a long ways towards de-escalating a situation. The other thing I'd say along the theme of de-escalation is if someone is upset, not a good time to try to talk with them. Step away, take a break. The other thing I'd say related to that is put it in writing. Sometimes a person can digest the information you're saying much better if they have time to study the words, reflect on what you've written at their own pace, and so forth. So sometimes that can go a long ways towards effective communication.
That's great advice. Really, for any type of escalated or elevated situation, right? Stay calm, stay professional. Even sometimes I find that documenting something myself helps me understand the situation better and makes me able to communicate it verbally or in other ways a little bit better because I've thought it through a little bit further than just responding to it in a conversation. So I think that's really powerful there. At the end of the day, these people deserve respect, right? But they also need to be held accountable for the lease and the housing situation that they're in, and staying calm and sticking to the facts of the situation while also being compassionate and having those resources available for them. Really, it's kind of the full package, right?
Yeah, facts of the situation and the relevant provision of the lease that you're sort of operating within.
Terrific. Well, Abe, if anyone wants to reach out and learn more about what you're doing with Housing Unlimited, or if they have questions about how to help people that are working through mental health issues, is there a good way they can connect with you, a website or something like that?
Yeah, we're happy to talk. Our website is www.housingunlimited.org, and our email is information@housingunlimited.org.
Excellent. Well, Abe, I really appreciate your time today. Again, this is such a great and needed topic that we have to talk more and more about. Again, mental health concerns continue to rise in our nation. I really applaud you for the work you've been doing for 32 years to help this segment of our country and of these types of residents. It's important work, and I encourage you to keep doing it and hopefully continue to adding to those number of homes so you can clear out that waiting list that you have there.
Right. Thank you, Joe. It's been like I said, a privilege to be with you and to have this discussion, and I thank you for your time.
Absolutely. And thank you for your time, to our audience for joining us for another episode. And until next time, keep going beyond rent.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Beyond Rent. If you enjoyed this podcast, spread the word on social media and with your peers in the industry. To be notified when more episodes are released, subscribe using your favorite podcast player. Beyond Rent is brought to you by Rent Manager Property Management Software. Learn more about Rent Manager's industry-leading software solutions at rentmanager.com. Until next time, keep going beyond rent.